Hi there, my name is Ewan Nicholson. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be exploring and really looking to the phenomena of, do you find yourself obsessively thinking over what people think about you? Do you find yourself in these kind of rumination spirals where you're caught spending an inordinate amount of time wondering, thinking, considering what someone else thinks of you? And we'll begin looking at why that occurs, like what's the origin of this process. Most importantly, is there a way we can kind of discharge this, and how do we do that, and what's involved in that? Because if you're someone that has found yourself caught in this habit of obsessively thinking about what other people think about you, it can feel very tiring, it can feel very exhausting. And there's also just awareness of, somewhere inside of me, I know this isn't either connected to reality, or if it is, it doesn't matter. There's some awareness that this generally doesn't serve us. Like, we don't end up anywhere further ahead. We're like a hamster spinning on a wheel, but at the same time, like, our capacity to kind of change this habit or change this way of dealing with things also isn't as simple as just, well, don't do that, or because if it was as simple as that, you just wouldn't be doing it, and that would be it. So let's have a look a little bit about what this is, like why this arises, and what we can do to kind of discharge some of the momentum or some of the habit itself. Okay, so if you're a person that finds yourself in situations where something has been said or something has been done, and then you go away imagining what they're thinking of you. Now, sometimes this can be just something innocuous with a stranger, where you're at a bakery, and when they say goodbye, you say hello, or you kind of make some social faux pas in some situation, and you go away thinking all these thoughts about what they could be thinking about you, and I'm never going to go back to that bakery again. Or it could all be also as intimate as someone you've been in a relationship, someone you work with, and something's happened where you feel judged on some level, and then you end up really spending all this time imagining and considering and obsessing over what they now think of you and what you're going to do and what you're going to say, and there's imaginary conversations, and there's a whole process that you're drawn into in this imaginary thinking world of what they think of you, and it's very, very hard to let go of, and it's very, very distressing, because we're creating stories and narratives where we feel like we're anticipating this judgment. And sometimes, maybe it's related to what they think, but often or not, it's really what's going on in our imagination. It's a perception that we feel that there's a judgment here, and we're kind of obsessing over what that judgment is and what that could look like, and we're kind of we're caught in this loop. So that's the phenomena. And if you're watching this video, maybe you've experienced that. That's kind of what ends up going on. So what we really want to understand is, like, what is going on? Like, what happens? Why do we get pulled into this? Because if what you do is if you identify with what I'm saying and you feel like, yes, I definitely spend a lot of time thinking about what people think about me, we have to kind of trace this back a little. Because this is a creative adjustment. This is something we've employed somewhere in our life to deal with something else. So we've got to slow down a little bit and look for the origin point. And it often isn't a single event point. It's like a build-up of relationship dynamics and adaptations to relationship dynamics, which becomes a thing we do. A little bit like it's an internal version of a type of tick, where we pull our hair or scratch our skin. It's something we end up doing to cope with something else. So the question then becomes, like, what is that something else? Like, what created the space for this to arise, where this felt like this is how I deal with something? So this isn't like a problem you have or you've got some issue. It's somewhere along the line it became a way of dealing with something else. So what is that something else? What's gone on in our life where we could use this as a way of dealing with something else? And often somewhere in our childhood, and it doesn't have to be childhood trauma in inverted commas all the time, sometimes it is, but sometimes it can be a challenging relationship. But it's often a feeling of somewhere growing up we didn't know where we stood with someone. Because there are two types of trauma in childhood. There's violation or invasion, and then there's abandonment, where things happen to us that shouldn't, or where our space and our place and sense of who we are is invaded. And then there's a sense of abandonment, where we have needs that are just unmet. And somewhere, if you trace back, somewhere in your childhood, there's a feeling of uncertainty with someone. There's a feeling of someone's love, who maybe you needed, security and validation that you required, that just wasn't there. Whether they were stressed, whether they weren't present, whether they were, instead of that, there was violence. It doesn't matter kind of what it necessarily was, but there's a sense of we've left this emotional feeling of feeling uncertain, feeling potentially judged. And as a result of that, we move into our mind, we move into our thinking process as a way to, because it feels as we're doing it, we're trying to be a step ahead. We're thinking about all the things that could happen, all the things they could be thinking about us, as a way to anticipate this future judgment and danger. But if we were able to kind of relax and able to pay attention to what's the feeling prior to moving into that loop, there's a feeling of judgment towards ourselves. There's a feeling of we're not enough. There's a feeling of there's something wrong with me. There's a feeling of rejection or abandonment somewhere in that. And then we move into our thinking process, just like someone moves into overeating or moves into addiction or moves into disassociation. There's this movement away from a feeling into our thinking process. And at some level or at some point, there is a relief. And this is why it's very hard to let go of. This is why these processes, you can't just say, don't do that. It's like there's a kind of like a conceptual pacifier or a dummy that we're sucking on that feels like it's doing a thing, and we're kind of calculating and working all this stuff out in our mind, but really it's what it's moving us away from. And there's a feeling of I'm about to be rejected, I'm not worthy. There's a discomfort somatically or inside of our emotional center that this rumination loop enables us to move away from. It's like a weird kind of mental safe place, where as long as I'm thinking and calculating and anticipating, I don't have to be with this original feeling. And so the healing process of how do we get out of this, how do we discharge this habit, is understanding this is the kind of the origin of it. It's a feeling of something inside of us feels unworthy, unlovable, feels like we're about to be rejected, and we're now anticipating what that may be. And to heal this process, we can't think our way out of it. That's what thinking has this way of, there's always one more thought to do, or there's always one more calculation to have. So therefore, it's like we can't mentally work our way. It doesn't have its origins in a mental process. The mental process is the end result, not its origin. So there are two things I would recommend in terms of if you really want to work, if you feel like I do obsessively think about how people think about me, is first of all inner child work. That there's some wound here somewhere inside of you to do with a sense of rejection or abandonment, and it's how do we reparent that? How do we reconnect and be present with and available for that child that someone wasn't available for at that moment? And that aspect, that mechanism of doing that in of itself will have some healing effect. And the second thing, as you work on that, something I'm talking about on this channel all the time, is developing a mindfulness practice. And that is developing an understanding of, like, what are our thoughts? How do we think? Why do we think? And we're in such a society, that there's so much emphasis on thinking as the only means and mechanisms to problem solve, to understand reality, to perceive reality. It's almost inconceivable that outside of thinking, there are other modes of perception and experience. So a mindfulness practice can help us, one, regain the capacity to feel I can be with myself. I don't have to go outwards, whether it's disassociation, whether it's addiction, whether it's obsessive thinking. It's like an outward movement away from our own lived experience, our own sense of where we are. And mindfulness can help us train back into the comfortability of being where we are. But so I think they're the two things I'd recommend: inner child work and mindfulness practice. But I think from an awareness perspective is like, I do this as a result of that. And I think on a more sort of fundamental level, we have to slow down a little bit. We have to slow down and pay attention to when I go into this obsessive thinking, what's the feeling that just precedes that a little? Because we move into it so quickly, we can lose contact with what that is. What's this discomfort? What's this felt sense of whatever it may be, rejection or abandonment or vulnerability, that this thinking I go into takes me away from? And as you get a sense of that or a feel of that, that's what we're working with, not the thoughts themselves. So look, I hope this has helped. I hope this has made sense. If you've got any experiences of this, please put them in the comment section. If you'd like to explore therapy with myself, I have a free consultation I offer to all people, humans, people, whatever. I'll put a link in the description. Please take care of yourself, and goodbye.